Hello everyone, my name is Jonah Powell and today I'm going to be talking to you about cystic fibrosis. We're going to be covering how cystic fibrosis affects the body as well as the necessary treatment, medication, and therapy that is needed.
Cystic fibrosis is a disease that is genetically inherited. It's caused by a defective gene that is inherited from both parents. This defective gene creates a different version of the protein CFTR that negatively changes the way chloride moves between cells inside the body. This causes mucus in the body to become heavy and sticky instead of thin and slippery. Before we get into how the mucus affects the body, we are going to go over some general facts of cystic fibrosis. So, half of all people who are affected by cystic fibrosis only live to about 30 years of age. This makes cystic fibrosis a very deadly disease, and it is also chronic, which means that it lasts a lifetime and actually gets worse over time. There is no known cure for cystic fibrosis. So what makes cystic fibrosis so deadly is its effect on the respiratory system. So naturally, thin layers of mucus line the respiratory tract to help protect it and to help clean the inhaled air that we suck in. Cystic fibrosis takes this same mucus and basically makes it thick and really sticky and just really heavy. And because of that, it clogs the bronchioles. Now the bronchioles are responsible for sending air to the alveoli, which are in the lungs. So basically, this thick, sticky, heavy mucus is preventing air from reaching the lungs. Now, as you can imagine, this is not good at all for the lungs. Because of this, the lungs get really weak because they're not really getting used a whole lot. So in turn, that causes lung disease. And lung disease is actually the main cause of death for people with cystic fibrosis. Now we are going to talk about how cystic fibrosis affects the sweat glands. So the big issue with people who have cystic fibrosis and the sweat glands is that they lose a lot of salt. So that is why for people who have cystic fibrosis, if they're exercising or working out, it's a lot more dangerous for them because they're more prone to tiredness and fatigue, muscle cramps, dehydration's a big one, and even fever. Now the most alarming cases include, but these are extreme, but still, these include fainting, going into shock, and irregular heart rhythms, which can even lead to death. So it is absolutely crucial that people with cystic fibrosis, especially when they're exercising, make sure that they are well hydrated and have plenty of sodium in their bodies. Now we're going to go ahead and get into how cystic fibrosis affects the digestive system. So naturally we have enzymes that get created in the pancreas. These enzymes then get secreted into the stomach and help break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And they extract the nutrients from the foods that we eat. So pretty similarly to how cystic fibrosis affects the lungs with the thick mucus, that same thick mucus actually blocks those enzymes from leaving the pancreas and going to the stomach to digest those foods. That is a huge issue because it prevents the proper nutrients. It prevents people with cystic fibrosis from getting the right nutrients that they need. And that actually causes, that actually gets in the way of the growth process for people with cystic fibrosis. That also plays a huge role on the immune system because of that lack of nutrition that they're not getting. Cystic fibrosis even affects both the male and female reproductive system. In men, what cystic fibrosis does is sterilizes them. What happens is the tubes that are responsible for transporting the sperm to the testes they just fail to develop. The sperm is still produced properly, it's just the tubes don't develop right. A positive thing is that this is able to be fixed with surgery. So what this means is that men with cystic fibrosis are still fully capable of having kids. For women with cystic fibrosis, some might actually find it harder to get pregnant and even remain pregnant. Despite this, it is pretty uncommon for women with cystic fibrosis to not be able to get pregnant. But when it does happen, what happens is that the thick mucus basically blocks the sperm from reaching the egg and fertilizing it. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about medication, treatment, and therapy for cystic fibrosis. So thankfully there have been breakthroughs in this area. These breakthroughs are responsible for nearly quadrupling the life expectancy for people who have cystic fibrosis. Sadly, this is only in developed countries, but these breakthroughs include powerful antibiotics, which have helped prevent infections or have even helped fight off infections. Decongestants are another big breakthrough that have drastically helped making breathing easier for people with cystic fibrosis. Mucolytics also is another huge one that helps people with cystic fibrosis drain that thick mucus from their lungs. Chest physical therapy is another extremely useful method for draining that thick mucus from the lungs and the airways. Another useful tool are x-rays. And what x-rays do is reveal how well the lungs are doing and what shape they're in. Lung transplants are also necessary for those who have severe lung damage, as those transplants can potentially save lives. Enzyme supplements are another huge medication breakthrough. As we previously talked about, that thick mucus can block the enzyme secretion from the pancreas to the stomach and prevents that digestion of the nutrients. With enzyme supplements, that's no longer the case. A normal diet is also a very important aspect for people with cystic fibrosis. It really matters what they put into their body. Now we're going to talk about some effective activities that will benefit the health of people with cystic fibrosis. So exercise is it's crucial. Plain and simple. It goes hand in hand with treatment. Exercise can be anything from weight training to sports, to biking, to swimming, to running, and to even yoga. And what this does is it helps clear up that thick mucus that is all over the body in people with cystic fibrosis. And each one of these activities also is effective in improving breathing and even the heart health for people with cystic fibrosis. So next, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first class activity. So I'm going to have you guys follow this link. It's going to be in the description below, and watch this video. It's just under 8 minutes, and after you watch the whole video, go ahead and list 3 ways yoga can be beneficial for people with cystic fibrosis. Some important considerations when working with people with cystic fibrosis is that each person with cystic fibrosis is different. So that means activities or treatments that work for one person may not work for the next. Another thing to keep in mind is that extra fluids and extra sodium when exercising is very important, because people with cystic fibrosis are prone to losing a lot of salt. Another thing is that a positive attitude is crucial when working with people with cystic fibrosis, just like with everything else in life. People with cystic fibrosis might see the disease as being part of who they are, while others see the disease as an obstacle that they just have to overcome. The point is that everyone is different. So for our next activity, I'm going to have you guys follow this link in the description, and you are going to play the game Free the Mucus. Thank you guys so much for listening and participating.